I didn't want the job. If I had even the slightest alternative, another gig, a loan extension, anything, I would have turned it down. But when you're 3 months behind on rent and your pantry holds little more than stale cereal, your choices become limited. So when the landlord offered me the job cleaning out one of his old properties, an abandoned house on the edge of town, I said yes. Thought the pay was suspiciously generous. He even avoided eye contact when I asked why. All he said was just get it cleaned out. Don't worry about the rest. That rest started to unravel the moment I arrived. The house stood at the end of a long gravel driveway, choked by weeds and overshadowed by tall, drooping trees that blocked out the morning sun. Paint peeled from the siding like scabs on dead skin, and the windows looked like empty eye sockets in a skull. A crow watched me from the gnarled fence post as I stepped out of my car, cawing once before flying off. I should have taken that as a sign. As I reached for my cleaning kit in the back seat. A sudden chill ran down my spine, and I glanced up. My breath caught. There on the second floor, behind a cracked window pane, was a Fail, still watching. I froze. Keys in one hand and a spray bottle in the other, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. The face didn't move. It didn't blink. It just stared at me with hollow eyes and expressionless silence. Then, as quickly as I noticed it, it was gone. My mind scrambled for a rational explanation. Trick of the light. Old curtain fluttering. Maybe even a squirrel or bird casting a weird shadow. Anything but what I thought I saw. I stared again at the empty window, now reflecting only the gray clouds overhead. You're just tired, I told myself. You need this money. Don't screw it up. I forced myself up the driveway, each crunch of gravel underfoot echoing. Like a warning. The air seemed to thicken around me the closer I got to the porch, pressing against my skin like invisible fingers. I hesitated at the front steps. The wood creaked loudly under my boot, and the doorknob resisted before giving way with a screech. Inside, the stench hit me like a wall rot, mildew time. The kind of smell that clings to your clothes and seeps into your skin. The hallway stretched. Ahead, cloaked in shadow despite the daylight. Wallpaper peeled from the walls in curling flakes, and the floor was littered with leaves, dust, and fragments of glass. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The silence was complete, almost. Suffocating. No distant cars, no birdsong, not even the wind. Just the steady thud of my heartbeat and the creaks of the aging floor beneath me. I told myself it was just a house. Old places made noises. They groaned, settled, sighed. But that didn't explain. The feeling crawling up my spine, the sense that something had just slipped out of view whenever I turned my head, set my cleaning kit down and started with the living room. Dust smothered every surface. Sheets, once white, covered most of the furniture like shrouds. I peeled them back one by one, choking on the dust clouds they released. A couch, a coffee table, an ancient armchair. The room was arranged like someone had left in a hurry and never came back. But it felt wrong. The light from the broken blinds cast long, crooked shadows across the room. No matter how I adjusted my position, some corners remained unnaturally dark. My eyes kept drifting to the chair in the far corner, the one I was sure had been empty when I walked in. Now it wasn't. There was no one there. But the cushion bore a distinct impression as though someone had just risen from it. The dust around it was disturbed. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't touched the chair. I swallowed hard and stepped closer. The air around the chair was colder, not cool, not drafty cold. Like a walk-in freezer, I reached out tentatively, but the temperature alone made me pull back. Then came the creak. From upstairs, I flinched and looked toward the ceiling. Another creak. Deliberate, like a footstep. I told myself it was nothing. Probably a bird or a squirrel in the attic. Maybe a rafter settling. Anything to ignore the possibility of what I really feared. I turned back to the chair and froze. The indentation was gone. The cushion was smooth again, undisturbed, as if no one had ever sat there at all. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My mind flipped through explanations, none of them satisfying. Maybe my imagination was playing tricks. Maybe the dust had shifted on its own, but I didn't believe it. Then I heard it. Tap dot 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 tap dot 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 tap dot steady. Measured. Like someone knocking on the floor dot. I slowly backed away from the chair and looked up again. That window, that face. The memory hit me like a slap. I hadn't imagined it. I knew it now. The house wasn't empty, not entirely. I stared up at the ceiling, every muscle in my body tense. The tapping had stopped, but the silence it left behind felt even worse, like the house was holding its breath, waiting. I stood perfectly still in the middle of the living room, the dust and the air swirling around me like slow-moving snow. The weight of the quiet pressed against my ears, and my thoughts screamed in the vacuum. Just go upstairs, I whispered to myself. Get it over with. Prove there's nothing there. I didn't believe the words. Still, I picked up my flashlight, wiped my hands on my jeans, and crept toward the staircase. Each step groaned under my weight, the wood swollen and warped from years of neglect. I gripped the banister tightly, more for comfort than balance. Halfway up, I paused and listened. Nothing, but the absence of sound wasn't reassuring it. With sinister dot at the top, the hallway stretched left and right, a faded runner rug leading the way past cracked doors and shadowed thresholds. At the far end was a single room with its door slightly ajar. I didn't need to guess which one it was. The room with the window, the one where I saw the face. I walked forward slowly, each step stirring the dust into tiny clouds that glittered in the dull light from the hallway. The door creaked as I nudged. It opened, revealing a room coated in layers of stillness and grime. A broken dresser leaned against the wall, and an old iron bed frame stood naked, its mattress long gone. A shattered mirror rested against the far corner, the spiderweb cracks. Catching the dim light like veins of rot, I stepped inside. The temperature dropped almost instantly. My breath fogged the air. I shivered, but not just from the cold. Something about this room felt wrong in a deeply rooted way. Like it hadn't just been abandoned. It had been avoided. My eyes went to the window at first. I didn't notice. The grime and streaks on the glass made it hard to see. But then my gaze caught something smudged onto the inside of the window pane. I stepped closer, heart hammering in my chest, and that's how I saw it. AAANDPRNT. It was unmistakable. Thin fingers, long and spidery, pressed firmly against the glass. It looked fresh. The dust around it was undisturbed, yet the print was clear. No smearing. No signs of age, just recent dot. I took a step back, adrenaline spiking in my veins. My mouth was dry. I turned to leave the room and froze. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, expecting someone to be standing there. But the room was empty, completely, undeniably empty. But the hallway? I peeked out the door. Nothing. Just the same peeling wallpaper and sagging ceiling tiles. Still, the hair on my arms stood on end. I could feel it, something unseen, lurking just out of sight. I backed away from the room and made my way down the hall, trying to ignore the cold sweat trickling down my neck. My boots scuffed against the rug, stirring the dust that hadn't been touched in years. I moved faster, almost to the stairs. Then I heard it again, dot tap. Tap, tap, dot, but not from upstairs this time. It was coming from beneath me, dot from the basement. I paused at the top of the stairs. For a moment, I considered leaving, just grabbing my gear and walking out. No explanation needed. But something anchored me to that spot. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper. Something close to obsession. I had to know. Back downstairs. I tried to distract myself by focusing on cleaning, moving mechanically through the living room and hallway. I vacuumed what I could, wiped down the walls. But my thoughts kept drifting to the handprint, the tapping, and the face in the window. That's when I saw the cabinet that it stood in the corner of the room, mostly hidden under a yellowing dust sheet. The handles were rusted, the wood warped and cracked. I don't know why I felt drawn to it, but I did. Like something inside needed to be seen. I pulled back the sheet, dust fluttering into the air. The doors resisted, but after a few hard yanks, they creaked open. Inside were old papers, some yellowed and brittle, others rolled into tight scrolls. Trinkets too, buttons, rusted keys, faded photos, a broken pocket watch. Nestled among them was an envelope sealed and marked with a single word, written in red ink, stone single quotes, T. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to put it back. But I didn't. My fingers moved on their own, peeling back the brittle flap. Inside were 3 photographs, all black and white. The first was of the house itself decades ago, clean and whole, with a manicured lawn and bright windows. The second showed a family, 2 parents, and a small boy posing in front of the same porch I'd just walked up. Their smiles were stiff and unnatural. The third made my breath stop. It was the living room. This very room. But it wasn't empty in the photo. The chair in the corner, the same one I'd seen earlier, was occupied. A man sat in it, pale skin, blackened eyes. A grin that twisted unnaturally, too wide for his face. His hand rested on the arms of the chair, fingers long and thin. His posture was relaxed, like he was waiting for someone. And his eyes, those black voids, were staring directly into the camera. Into me. I dropped the photo, my pulse hammering in my skull. The room around me suddenly felt too small, like the walls were closing in. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to remind myself it was just a picture. Then the tapping started again. This time, it was louder, and it was definitely coming from the basement. The tapping grew louder, sharper, like someone rapping their knuckles against bare wood in a steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Then a pause. Then again. Tap, tap, tap. Rhythmic, intentional, beckoning. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, the photograph of the grinning man still lying at my feet. I didn't dare look at it again. My gaze had already drifted toward the narrow door. In the far hallway, the one I'd assumed led to a pantry or utility closet. It didn't. I approached slowly, my legs moving without my permission. The door was cracked open, just enough to show that it didn't end in a wall. A staircase led downward, vanishing into pitch black. As I got closer, a gust of cold air rolled up from the darkness, carrying the sharp scent of damp earth and something older. Something sour. I hesitated at the threshold, my fingers grazing the light switch on the wall. I flipped it. Nothing. The bulb above the stairs remained stubbornly dark. Figures. I pulled out my flashlight, thumbed it on, and aimed the narrow beam into the stairwell. The wooden steps descended farther than I expected, framed by crumbling stone walls and wrapped in dense shadows. The tapping had stopped the moment I touched the door. Hello? I called out, barely recognizing my own voice. Silence. I took the first step, then another. The boards groaned beneath my boots as I made my way down, one cautious footfall at a time. The deeper I went, the colder it became. I could see my breath again. The beam of the flashlight trembled in my grasp, the circle of light jittering with. My pulse. About 10 steps down, I froze. Something moved just outside the beam of light. A flicker, shadow against the far wall. I snapped the flashlight toward it. Nothing. Just old furniture, stacks of boxes, shattered glass, and spiderwebs stretching like threads of silk from corner to corner. I told myself to turn around, but I didn't. I reached the bottom. And the moment I stepped onto the concrete floor, the air shifted, heavier, thicker. It pressed against my chest like a wet blanket. I swung the light around the basement, revealing rusted pipes, water stains, and a long-forgotten wooden table in the center of the room. That's when I saw the chair, the same damn chair from the living room, the one from the photograph. It sat directly beneath the single hanging bulb, which now flickered to life with a low hum. I hadn't touched anything, hadn't flipped a switch. But the light was on. The chair was exactly the same scratched wood, worn fabric, dust-lined edges. But it wasn't empty. Someone sat in it. Or something. The figure was motionless, a silhouette in the flickering light, as if molded from shadow itself. It had a face, but not a human one, not anymore. The skin looked stretched, too tight across. Its skull, The eyes were deep black voids, swallowing the light around them. And that grin, my god, that grin curled impossibly wide, like it had been cut into the face with a dull blade. Stopped my breath. Then it spoke. Why are you here? The voice was raspy, barely above a whisper, but it cut through. The silence like a blade. It came from behind me. I spun around. Nothing got my flashlight flickered violently, then died. The overhead bulb pulsed once, twice then held. I turned back to the chair, empty, no sign of the figure. Just the chair sitting there like it had never been occupied. The voice returned. Closer this time. You shouldn't have come. I stumbled. Back, bumping into a table and sending an old tin can clattering to the floor. The sound echoed, loud and sharp, shattering the silence. I reached down to grab the flashlight, fumbling with the switch. The beam returned dim, flickering, but enough to see the room again. That's when I realized something else had changed. The walls. They were covered in writing. Long, looping scrawls in black ink or something darker stretched across the stone in every direction. Words repeated over and over. Don't look. Don't stay. He waits. He waits. I backed toward the stairs, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. As I did, something scraped across the floor behind me. I turned just in time to see one of the boxes shifting on its own, slowly sliding out of the shadows. I didn't care what was inside. I ran. I bolted up the stairs, nearly tripping over my own feet. The basement door stood open, at the top wide open, though I was sure I'd left it only slightly ajar. I didn't stop to think. I sprinted through, slammed it behind me, and twisted the old rusted lock. Then I just stood there, chest heaving, staring at the door. Got no sound, got no footsteps, just silence. But it wasn't comforting anymore. Moved back to the center of the living room and looked down at the photo I dropped earlier. It was face down now. Slowly, carefully, I bent and turned it over. The chair in the image was empty. No man. No twisted grin. Just an empty room, coated in dust. I sat on the edge of the couch, gripping the photo like a lifeline. My hands trembled. My legs ached. My brain throbbed with a single word. Why? Why was I here? The job? The money? That couldn't be it anymore. Air shifted again, and from upstairs again. The tapping resumed. This time, it was coming from inside the walls. The tapping had changed, no longer the slow, deliberate knocking from upstairs or the rhythmic pulse from the basement. This was closer inside the house. No, inside the walls. Like fingernails or claws gently dragging across wooden beams, moving horizontally, following me wherever I turned. I sat stiff on the couch, eyes fixed on the living room walls, listening to the scraping slither along the boards behind the wallpaper. First above my head, then behind me, then to my left. As if it were circling me, I clutched the photograph tighter, the image of the empty chair now a cruel joke. I knew what I'd seen, who I'd seen. No trick of the light could mimic those. Eyes that grin. Something was here, something that didn't want me to leave, but I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. I stood shakily and forced my legs to move, retracing my steps into the hallway. I needed to get to the back rooms. Maybe there were answers to anything to justify the unnatural tension in this place. I flicked on my flashlight again, the beam, flickering but staying steady. The hallway grew narrower the deeper I went. The air thickened, humid and cold at once. It felt like walking underwater, my limbs dragging as if some invisible force resisted each step. Cobwebs clung to the ceiling like veins, and I had to push them aside just to pass. I came to a small room at the very end, a study, from the look of it. A desk sat beneath a boarded-up window, drawers slightly ajar and spilling paper like a forgotten memory. On the wall above it hung a series of framed documents, some torn, others faded beyond recognition. But one stood out, clear, untouched by age or dust. It was a newspaper clipping. I stepped closer and squinted at the yellowed text. Local family disappears, house AB and DOD authorities are still searching for answers following the unexplained disappearance of the Graymore family. Neighbors reported unusual behavior in the weeks leading up to their vanishing. no lights at night, odd noises, and the occasional figure seen through the upstairs window. Despite multiple search efforts, no trace of the family has been found. The house has since been declared condemned. There was no date, no mention of what year the article was printed. But the photo beside it was unmistakable. It was this house. And the same window, the one I'd seen the face in, my blood ran cold suddenly. A gust of wind blew through the study, scattering the papers on the desk. The flashlight flickered again. I turned, instinctively backing away from the open door. That's when I saw the shadow move across the hall. Not fast. Not a blur. It walked, deliberately, silently. Something tall and impossibly thin passed from one side of the hallway to the other, vanishing into the room directly across from me. My hand tightened around the flashlight, and I stepped out into the hall again. Who's there? I called, voice barely audible over my own heartbeat. No answer, only the scratching. Louder now moved behind the walls, like something hunting, trailing me. I crept to the door the shadow had entered. It was slightly open. My hand hovered over the knob, shaking. Then I pushed it open. The room inside was a child's bedroom, or what remained of one, a small bed with rusted springs. Torn wallpaper with faded cartoon characters. Toys scattered across the floor like they'd been dropped in a hurry. But what caught my attention was the mirror dot. It was full length, tall, and cracked in a perfect circle at the center, as if someone had punched through from the other side. And within its fractured surface, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. My reflection was normal. But behind me, reflected in the glass, stood a figure. Pale, still, with a grin that split its face from ear to ear. Spun around. No one was there. I turned back. The mirror was now empty too. I stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a small dresser. My breathing came in sharp gasps as I backed out into the hall, refusing to look into the mirror again. Something was wrong with this place beyond haunting. It wasn't just a ghost. It wasn't just memories trapped in wooden plaster. It was alive. A consciousness in the house itself. Something that could move through walls. Mimic voices. Play with time. I retreated down the hallway, heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst. I was almost to the front door when the sound stopped me cold. A voice. Low. Familiar. From the basement door. Help me. It wasn't the raspy, twisted whisper from before. It sounded like a child. I froze, hand outstretched toward the front door. Again. The voice echoed faintly. Help me. Please. A small part of me, the rational part, knew it was bait. Knew it was a trick, but that didn't matter. I had to be sure. I grabbed the flashlight again and slowly, against every instinct I had, moved toward the basement. As I reached the door, it slowly creaked open, on its own, beyond it. The stairwell yawned like a throat, waiting to swallow me whole. I hesitated. Then I descended, and halfway down, I heard it again. But this time, it didn't sound like a child. It sounded like me. The sound of my own voice echoed up the basement stairs. Help me. The inflection, the breathiness, it was unmistakable. But I hadn't said a word. I froze halfway down the staircase, flashlight clenched in a white-knuckled grip. My legs wanted to run. My brain screamed at me to retreat, to never set foot in that basement again. But something about hearing myself beg for help held me there like a hook, sunk deep beneath my skin. I reached the bottom step. The basement was the same as before. Cold, damp, and quiet, but not silent. A new sound layered itself over the stillness now, a low humming, soft and almost tuneless. Like someone humming a lullaby they didn't remember learning. The light above flickered, then steadied. The chair in the middle of the room was still there. Empty again. I stepped forward cautiously, shining the flashlight around the room. The scrawled messages on the wall remained, but now something new had been added. Written in fresh, dark strokes across the far side of the room in large capital letters, I am still here. My pulse pounded in my ears. I scanned the space again, slower this time, checking the corners, behind boxes, under tables. The humming had stopped. I didn't realize how hard I was gripping the flashlight until I heard my joints pop. Dot. Then the sound returned, not humming. This time, but breathing. Dot deep. Labor. Dot right behind me. I turned around in an instant. Dot nothing. Dot the room was still, but something had changed. My flashlight beam caught on the floor near the far wall, where something had been dragged. Dust trails scraped aside, revealing the concrete underneath. They led to an old wooden wardrobe I hadn't noticed before, wedged into the corner. Dragging stopped right at its base. Dot, and then knocking got 3 hard knocks from inside the wardrobe door. Dot, my heart slammed against my ribs. I raised the flashlight, slowly stepped forward, each crunch of debris underfoot impossibly loud. Who's in there? I managed, my voice breaking. Dot, no answer. Just silence. I reached the wardrobe. The wood was warped, black with mold in spots. I gripped the handle and pulled. Dot, it didn't budge. I tried again, harder. This time the door creaked open just an inch. The smell that poured out was rancid, a mix of wet earth and rot, like something long dead had been sealed away. I held my breath and pulled harder. The door opened fully. The inside was empty. Dot at first. Dot, and then I saw a small trapdoor in the floor of the wardrobe. Barely noticeable beneath the grime and broken boards. Something had been moving through it. The edges were worn, as though hands had clawed their way in and out. Over and over again. Dot, my light caught movement. A hand-pale skeletal reached up from the trapdoor for just a split second, and vanished before I could blink. It had 5 fingers, but each was too long, too thin, and jointed in ways that didn't seem right. Dot, my instincts screamed, leave, now. But instead, I crouched down and reached for the trapdoor handle. The second, my fingers touched the iron ring. The room shook, not like an earthquake, but like the entire basement had inhaled sharply. The air thickened. The bulb above popped with a flash, plunging me into darkness. Dot, then came the voices. Dot, not just 1. Hundreds. Dot, all. Whispering, overlapping, indistinct. I stood shakily and forced my legs to move, retracing my steps into the hallway. I needed to get to the back rooms. Maybe there were answers to anything to justify the unnatural tension in this place. I flicked on my flashlight again, the beam flickering but staying steady. The hallway grew narrower the deeper I went. The air thickened, humid and cold at once. It felt like walking underwater, my limbs dragging as if some invisible force resisted each step. Cobwebs clung to the ceiling like veins, and I had to push them aside just to pass. I came to a small room at the very end, a study, from the look of it. A desk sat beneath a boarded-up window, drawers slightly ajar and spilling paper like a forgotten memory. On the wall above it hung a series of framed documents, some torn, others faded beyond recognition. But one stood out, clear, untouched by age or dust. Dot, it was a newspaper clipping. I stepped closer and squinted at the yellowed text. Local family disappears. House AB and DOD authorities are still searching for answers following the unexplained disappearance of the Graymore family. Neighbors reported unusual behavior in the weeks leading up to their vanishing, no lights at night, odd noises, and the occasional figure seen through the upstairs window. Despite multiple search efforts, no trace of the family has been found. The house has since been declared condemned. There was no date, no mention of what year the article was printed. But the photo beside it was unmistakable. It was this house. And the same window, the one I'd seen the face in. Dot, my blood ran cold. Dot, suddenly. A gust of wind blew through the study, scattering the papers on the desk. The flashlight flickered again. I turned, instinctively backing away from the open door. That's when I saw the shadow move across the hall. Not fast. Not a blur. It walked, deliberately, silently. Something tall and impossibly thin passed from one side of the hallway to the other, vanishing into the room directly across from me. My hand tightened around the flashlight, and I stepped out into the hall again. Who's there? I called, voice barely audible over my own heartbeat. Dot, no answer, only the scratching. Louder now. Dot moved behind the walls, like something hunting, trailing me. I crept to the door the shadow had entered. It was slightly open. My hand hovered over the knob, shaking. Then I pushed it open. The room inside was a child's bedroom, or what remained of one, a small bed with rusted springs. Torn wallpaper with faded cartoon characters. Toys scattered across the floor like they'd been dropped in a hurry. But what caught my attention was the mirror dot. It was full length, tall, and cracked in a perfect circle at the center, as if someone had punched through from the other side. And within its fractured surface, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. My reflection was normal. But behind me, reflected in the glass, stood a figure pale, still, with a grin that split its face from ear to ear. Spun around. No one was there. I turned back. The mirror was now empty too. I stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a small dresser. My breathing came in sharp gasps as I backed out into the hall, refusing to look into the mirror again. Something was wrong with this place beyond haunting. It wasn't just a ghost. It wasn't just memories trapped in wooden plaster. It was alive. A consciousness in the house itself. Something that could move through walls. Mimic voices. Play with. Time. I retreated down the hallway, heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst. I was almost to the front door when the sound stopped me cold. A voice. Low. Familiar. From the basement door. Help me. It wasn't the raspy, twisted whisper from before. It sounded like a child. I froze, hand outstretched toward the front door. Again. The voice echoed faintly. Help me. Please. A small part of me, the rational part, knew it was bait. Knew it was a trick, but that didn't matter. I had to be sure. I grabbed the flashlight again and slowly, against every instinct I had, moved toward the basement. As I reached the door, it slowly creaked open, on its own, beyond it. The stairwell yawned like a throat, waiting to swallow me whole. I hesitated. Then I descended, and halfway down, I heard it again. But this time, it didn't sound like a child. It sounded like me. The sound of my own voice echoed up the basement stairs. Help me. The inflection, the breathiness, it was unmistakable. But I hadn't said a word. I froze halfway down the staircase, flashlight clenched in a white-knuckled grip. My legs wanted to run. My brain screamed at me to retreat, to never set foot in that basement again. But something about hearing myself beg for help held me there like a hook, sunk deep beneath my skin. I reached the bottom step. The basement was the same as before. Cold, damp, and quiet, but not silent. A new sound layered itself over the stillness now, a low humming, soft and almost tuneless. Like someone humming a lullaby they didn't remember learning. The light above flickered, then steadied. The chair in the middle of the room was still there. Empty again. I stepped forward cautiously, shining the flashlight around the room. The scrawled messages on the wall remained, but now something new had been added. Written in fresh, dark strokes across the far side of the room in large capital letters. I am still here. My pulse pounded in my ears. I scanned the space again, slower this time, checking the corners, behind boxes, under tables. The humming had stopped. I didn't realize how hard I was gripping the flashlight until I heard my joints pop. Then the sound returned, not humming. This time, but breathing. Deep. Labored. Right behind me. I turned around in an instant. Nothing. The room was still, but something had changed. My flashlight beam caught on the floor near the far wall, where something had been dragged. Dust trails scraped aside, revealing the concrete underneath. They led to an old wooden wardrobe I hadn't noticed before, wedged into the corner. Dragging stopped right at its base. And then knocking. 3 hard knocks from inside the wardrobe door. My heart slammed against my ribs. I raised the flashlight, slowly stepped forward, each crunch of debris underfoot impossibly loud. Who's in there? I managed, my voice breaking. No answer, just silence. I reached the wardrobe. The wood was warped, black with mold in spots. I gripped the handle and pulled. It didn't budge. I tried again, harder. This time the door creaked open just an inch. The smell that poured out was rancid, a mix of wet earth and rot, like something long dead had been sealed away. I held my breath and pulled harder. The door opened fully. The inside was Empty dot at first dot, and then I saw a small trapdoor in the floor of the wardrobe. Barely noticeable beneath the grime and broken boards. Something had been moving through it. The edges were worn, as though hands had clawed their way in and out. Over and over again dot my light caught movement. A hand-pale skeletal reached up from the trapdoor for just a split second, and vanished before I could blink. It had 5 fingers, but each was too long, too thin, and jointed in ways that didn't seem right. My instincts screamed, "Leave, now." But instead, I crouched down and reached for the trapdoor handle. The second, my fingers touched the iron ring. The room shook, not like an earthquake, but like the entire basement had inhaled sharply. The air thickened. The bulb above popped with a flash, plunging me into darkness. Then came the voices. Not just one. Hundreds. All. Whispering, overlapping, indistinct. Some cried, some laughed, some shouted. All of them layered over each other, building to a deafening crescendo. And through it all, one voice stood out deep. "Federal, wrong. Come down." My flashlight blinked back to life. The trapdoor was open. Steps led downward into pure black. But what chilled me wasn't the passageway. It was the fact that the chair in the center of the room was no longer empty. He was back, the pale man, blackened. Eyes that grinned stretched far too wide. But he wasn't sitting anymore. He was standing, facing me. And he was moving forward. Step by slow step. I stumbled backward, almost dropping the flashlight. The beam flickered again, but I kept it trained on him. He didn't blink, didn't sway, just kept coming. I turned and ran. My boots pounded the stairs, 2 steps at a time. I could feel him behind me, feel his presence like cold air chasing my heels. I hit the top and slammed the basement door shut, so hard the entire wall shook. I locked the bolt, but the handle began to turn, back and forth. Click, 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 click. Then silence. I stepped away from the door, my chest heaving every inch. Me slick with sweat, I staggered into the living room, barely able to stand. My cleaning kit sat where I left it, untouched. Absurdly mundane compared to what I'd seen. I should have run. I should have left the moment. I saw the face in the window, but I didn't, because when I looked at the photos again, those old black and white shots, I noticed something horrifying. In the corner of the 3rd photograph, near the edge of the frame, was me. Standing behind the chair, staring into the camera, eyes wide in terror, and I hadn't been there before. I stared at the photograph in disbelief. My face was unmistakable, caught in grainy black and white, standing just behind the grinning man in the chair, my eyes frozen wide with horror. That image hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. I hadn't stood in that spot, hadn't been anywhere near that camera, and yet there I was. Somehow as if the house had absorbed me, folded me into its history. I dropped the photo. My hands were trembling, the edges of my vision beginning to blur. I needed to get out now. No more basements, no more voices. No more mirrors or trapdoors or godforsaken photographs. Just out. I stumbled across the living room, nearly tripping over the rug as I lunged for the front door. My fingers closed around the doorknob and twisted. It wouldn't turn. I twisted harder. Yanked. Slammed my shoulder into it. The door didn't budge. The lock hadn't engaged. It wasn't jammed. It simply wouldn't open. I turned back to the room, my breath catching in my throat. Something had changed. All the furniture, the couch, the covered chairs, the dusty coffee table was gone, vanished. The room stood empty. Walls bare, floor stripped to worn wood. Even the light filtering through the blinds had dimmed into a dull reddish haze, like the house had shifted into a darker version of itself. I backed away, heart thudding like a drum. Then I heard it again. Tap. Tap. But this time, it was behind the walls, beneath the floor. In the ceiling everywhere. The house wasn't echoing anymore. It was speaking. A whisper followed the tapping, crawling over my skin like ants. "You came here." I turned and bolted for the hallway, hoping the back door, or even a window, might still lead out. I sprinted past the staircase, but something made me skid to a stop. The mirror, the one in the child's room. It was no longer cracked. It stood pristine now, polished and clear. And something was inside it, not a reflection, a scene. I stepped closer, unable to stop myself. The image inside the mirror showed the living room, but not how it was now. It showed me entering for the first time, dragging my cleaning kit, peering nervously into the darkened space. It was playing my memory back to me in perfect detail. And then the figure appeared behind the version of me in the reflection. The man from the chair, his grin wide, his fingers brushing my shoulder. I stumbled back in horror, shattering the mirror with the flashlight. Glass exploded outward. And for a second, the entire house shuddered. I bolted down the hall toward the back door. But it was gone. Where the door should have been was now a wall, solid, seamless. As if the frame had never existed, I turned back to the hallway. It wasn't there anymore, either just empty space. Stretching. Twisting. Changing. The house was folding itself, trapping me inside like a rat in a maze that never stayed the same. I staggered forward, unsure of where I was going anymore. Unsure if any direction was even real. That's when I saw them. The family, the same people from the photo, the man, the woman, the little boy standing in one of the rooms ahead. Not moving, not blinking. Their eyes were all black. Their mouths hung open just a little too wide, as if frozen mid-scream. But no sound came. I stepped backward into the hall again and bumped into someone. I spun around, and there he was, the man from the chair, closer than ever, grin wider than any human mouth should allow. He leaned in, face inches from mine. "You're part of it now," he whispered. The walls groaned. The lights died. Darkness swallowed everything. I don't remember how I got out. Or maybe I in single quotes, one moment I was in that suffocating dark. And the next, I was lying on the lawn, gasping for air beneath the pale light of morning. My car was still in the driveway. The front door was shut, as if nothing had happened. But something did. I tried to leave. I swear I did. I drove for hours, put miles between me and that cursed place. But every turn, every road led me in circles. Until night fell again, and when I looked up, I was back. Back at the house, parked in the driveway, staring up at the window, where my face was staring down. Not the pale man, single quotes, S. Mine. And now, it doesn't matter how far I drive, how many roads I take, I always return here. I can't leave. The house has me, and soon it might have you too. I wasn't looking for anything. The flea market stretched out before me like a graveyard of forgotten things. Dusty trinkets, mismatched antiques, tarnished silverware, half-broken toy, row after row of memories left behind. I walked slowly between the stalls, letting the murmur of strangers' conversations fade into background static. I wasn't shopping, not really. Just wandering. Like something was pulling me, and then I saw it. A wooden music box, it sat among chipped china. Plates and faded postcards, almost hidden beneath a yellowing lace cloth. Small, simple, but something about it caught my eye. The carvings along its surface were floral, delicate and looping like vines creeping across a forgotten grave. Time had worn them soft, the grooves barely visible unless you tilted it toward the light. The moment I saw it, something clenched inside. My chest, it wasn't just deja vu, it was deeper than that. Like my body remembered it before my mind did. I froze, staring. A breeze swept across the open-air market, and I felt a chill crawl across my skin. Something special about that one. The vendor said it, appearing at my elbow with a suddenness that startled me. He was old, his voice brittle like the pages of an old book. Had it for years? Can't say where it came from. I reached out slowly, fingers trembling as they hovered over the box. The moment my skin touched the wood, an electric shiver ran down my spine. I turned the key. A faint click. The lid creaked open, and the melody began to play. It started soft, almost gentle, but with each note, something inside me recoiled. My breath caught. My pulse quickened. I knew this song, but I'd never heard it in waking life, only in nightmares. The dream would always begin the same way. I was alone in a pitch black room, shadows writhing at the edges of my vision, a low, broken melody playing endlessly like an old record stuck on repeat. I would wander through a maze of doorless hallways, while unseen things whispered from the dark. That song always played in the background, weaving itself into the fabric of the nightmare. Now, it was playing in the real world. The vendor didn't seem to notice my reaction. He smiled politely, oblivious, while I stood frozen in place, caught. In the melody's vice grip, I should have walked away, put the box down, left the market, never looked back. But I couldn't. Before I realized what I was doing, I pulled a few crumpled bills from my wallet and handed them to the man. He slipped them into his apron with a nod and turned away. That was it. No receipt, no exchange. Just me in the box. Now, I carried it home on the passenger seat like a sleeping child. My apartment was quiet when I stepped inside. A silence too perfect. I set the box on the coffee table and stared at it as if it might move. The carving seemed more pronounced. In the apartment's low lighting, almost pulsing with a soft inner glow. I gave a nervous laugh, more to break the tension than from amusement. I tried to distract myself, open my laptop. Clicked through a few tabs, but my attention kept drifting back to the table. Back to the box. That melody ... I could still hear it. Not out loud, but echoing inside my head. It lingered like smoke, impossible to grasp and impossible to ignore. A sudden chill slithered across the room. I paused, hand frozen on the keyboard. I glanced around. The windows were shut. The vents were silent, but the temperature had dropped. Like someone had opened a freezer door. The silence thickened, and then I heard it again, the melody faint, distant, like it was coming from behind a wall. Or beneath the floorboards. I snapped my head toward the music box. Still closed. Still untouched. I stood slowly, unsure whether I was about to throw it in trash or smash it to pieces. But I didn't do either. I just stood there, watching. It did nothing, and that was almost worse. That night, the nightmare returned. I knew I was dreaming the moment. I felt the air shift. Cold, heavy, the blackness stretched forever. My footsteps echoed on invisible ground. The melody played, just as I remembered. Warped and off-key. The shadows writhed around me, twisting, pulsing, as if breathing. Then one of them turned. Not with a face, but with intent, with awareness. Its hollow silhouette leaned forward. A whisper, sharp and wet, slid into my ear. You let it in. I jerked awake with a gasp, sweat soaking my sheets. My bedroom was dark, but not silent. Somewhere in the apartment, the melody was still playing, and the lid to the music box was open. I stared at the open music box, the melody curling softly through. The room like smoke. It wasn't loud, just persistent, those same unsettling notes I'd heard in my dreams. Each one seemed to vibrate through the walls, through my skin, through my teeth. I hadn't touched it. I was sure I'd closed the lid. Before going to bed, positive. Now it sat wide open on the coffee table. The tiny dancer inside slowly turning. Arms frozen in mid-spin, like it was trapped in the moment. The key hadn't been wound. The room was too cold. The air too still. Every sound, every creak of the floorboards beneath my bare feet echoed like thunder. I stepped forward slowly, drawn to the box like a moth to flame, unable to look away. When I reached the table, the music stopped, abrupt, like it had been caught. Silence slammed into the apartment, thick and stifling. I closed the lid, but the melody didn't stop playing in my head. The next day, I tried to forget. I shoved the music box into the top drawer of my dresser, buried under sweaters, far from sight. I opened every window, let in the sun, made coffee. Normal things. I told myself it had been a dream, that my mind was playing tricks on me, but deep down, I didn't believe it. I couldn't. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. If I was going to convince myself that this was nothing, just a coincidence, I needed to know where it came from, and why that song was so familiar. I typed antique music box melody nightmare familiarity. Then, music box haunting dream melody repeating. The results were junk. paranormal forums, clickbait blogs, videos of people claiming their furniture was haunted. Then I tried something else. I remembered the faint letters carved into the side of the box. Barely there. Almost missed them last night. A G initials? I typed music box at G initials, carved old. At first, more noise. Scattered results. Etsy listings. Antique listings. But buried halfway down the second page was a forum thread titled Amelia Gray, the vanishing girl in the box that followed. The post was from years ago. The photos were blurry. But the headline made my skin crawl. I clicked. The story unfolded in broken fragments. In 1953, a 12-year-old girl named Amelia Gray vanished from her family's estate outside Boston. No signs of struggle. No ransom note. Just gone to her bedroom. Had been left untouched, they said. A half-made bed. An empty cup of cocoa. And on the windowsill, a music box. The same music box that the photo in the article, though low resolution, was unmistakable. The carving, the shape, even the twisted, smiling ballerina figure inside. That was it. Mine. The article claimed that after Amelia's disappearance, the music box changed hands many times. Owners reported disturbing dreams, hallucinations, sudden mental breaks. One man even claimed it followed him from state to state, even after he'd sold it. One sentence stood out, etched into my brain like a scar. They all say the same thing. They've heard the song before. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my kitchen, lights on, coffee growing cold in my hands. I didn't open the drawer. I didn't touch the music box. I just waited, listened at 3:17 It started playing again. Soft, just audible enough to send a jolt through my chest. I ran to the dresser and yanked the drawer open, still shut. I flung the lid open myself. The key hadn't moved. The gears weren't turning. The dancer wasn't spinning, but the melody was playing, from somewhere inside the box. Or beneath it, don't know, from inside the walls. I grabbed it and turned it over in my hands. The wood was freezing cold, wet with condensation, like it had been stored in a freezer. I dropped it, stumbling back. Heart racing. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then off. I stood in total darkness. The only sound that awful melody, warbling now, distorted like it was struggling to crawl out of something ancient and buried. And then a whisper, right behind me. You let it in. I screamed. I don't remember flipping the light switch. Don't remember backing into the hallway wall, hands shaking. But when the lights came back on, the apartment looked the same. Empty. Quiet. Normal. Except that W and single quotes to the feeling hadn't left. The heaviness in the air. The way the shadows lingered a little too long in the corners. Something had changed. Something had entered. The next morning, I made a decision. I'd throw the box away. Take it to a junkyard. Burn it. Do something. I shoved it back in its box. And taped it shut. I couldn't bear to hear that song one more time. But before I could take a step, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You can't get rid of it. I froze. The sender had no name, no number. Just a blank contact and those 5 words. And attached one photo. It was me. Standing in my apartment, holding the music box. But I hadn't taken it, and I was alone. I dropped the phone. It hit the hardwood floor. With a dull thud, screen still glowing, photos still displayed. Me, in my apartment, holding the music box I had just sealed away, seconds early. I stared at the image, struggling to breathe. The lighting in the photo was identical to the room around me. Same shadows, same position, same clothes, but I hadn't taken that photo. And I was alone. Slowly, I bent down, picked up the phone. The screen flickered as if reacting to my trembling fingers. I tried to call anyone, but there were no signal bars. Just the words, no service in the corner. A chill ran down my spine. I turned in place. Scanning the apartment. Nothing. No one. Just me and the creeping feeling that something unseen was watching from just beyond the veil. Then, from behind, the taped box came a soft knock. Tap. 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 I didn't move. The knock came again, louder this time. like fingers tapping from the inside. I backed away. My legs hit the edge of the couch, and I sank into it without thinking. Eyes locked on the box. It didn't move. The lid didn't open. The tape didn't peel, but the knocking continued, rhythmic. Measured dot, and then it stopped. The silence afterward was worse. I stayed on the couch until daylight broke, watching the shadows shift across the walls. The knocking never returned, but I could feel it. Something had changed. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time I shut my eyes, I heard the melody begin again in the back of my mind. Always just faint enough to doubt. Always just clear enough to know it was real. I called in sick. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what the hell was happening to me. The story of Amelia Gray still looped up to my thoughts. A girl vanishes. A cursed music box left behind. Owners haunted, changed, or driven mad. But why? Why the melody? Why the whispers? Why me? I tore the tape off the box and opened it again. Nothing inside had changed. The ballerina sat frozen, mid-twirl. Eyes blank and lifeless. The tiny gears were still. The key hadn't been touched, but underneath the fabric lining of the box, something caught my eye. I peeled it back. A folded, yellowed slip of paper was tucked beneath the false bottom. I pulled it out with trembling fingers and unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was faded. Looping cursive. Do not listen too long. It remembers the ones who hear. It wants to be remembered. Beneath that, scribbled in a different, more frantic hand. It watched me sleep last night. It stands in the corners, behind the cracks. I heard it humming through the pipes. My name was on its tongue. A final line, nearly torn through from pressure. It is not bound by wood or metal. I spent the next hours researching, digging deeper into Amelia Gray's disappearance farther than the blogs and surface-level legends. I scoured newspaper archives, scanned PDFs of books on hauntings, folklore, cursed objects, and that's when I found him. A man named Peter Lanes, a professor at a university in Maine. He'd written a thesis in the 90s about cursed heirlooms objects with recurring histories of tragedy and psychological influence. Buried in one of his footnotes was a passing reference to the recurring auditory hallucinations tied to heirlooms such as the Amelia Gray box, AG box, which, according to myth, plays a song from the subconscious. Auditory hallucinations, a melody no one else could hear. A box with a memory of its own. I found a faculty contact email, long defunct. But there was a newer article online. He'd been interviewed on a paranormal podcast 2 years ago. Retired now, still alive, still writing, still obsessed with a box that dreams remember. I sent him an email. I didn't expect a reply. He answered 20 minutes later. You found it. That was all it said. He agreed to talk the next day. I barely made it through the night. Melody returned again around midnight. It didn't come from the box this time. It came from the walls deep inside, like it was being carried through old pipes, through wiring, through air itself. Then came the whispering, dozens of voices, all at once. All around me got low, garbled, just beyond clarity, like a crowd whispering. Behind a pane of glass? I pressed my hands to my ears, but it didn't help. The sounds were inside my head. I ran into the bathroom and slammed the door. Sat with my back to it. Chest heaving. The whispers followed me. Something scrawled in the fog on the mirror. Words I hadn't written. You belong to it now. I stared at the foggy message until the letters dripped and vanished. I had to leave, but when I opened the front door, the hallway wasn't there. It was black. An endless void where the outside world should have been. I threw on my coat anyway, stepped out into the dark, and slammed the door shut behind me. I didn't even take the music box with me. I didn't have to doubt it was already inside me. I didn't know how I made it outside. When I stepped through the front door, expecting the hallway to be nothing but shadow, I instead found myself standing on the sidewalk. A thin veil of fog curling along the street like smoke. Everything looked the same, but it felt off, like reality was trying to remember itself. The world was quiet, too quiet. Not in the peaceful way silence usually feels. but as if the sound had been removed, surgically cut out of the air. And no birds, no cars, not even the hum of the city, just the faint melody playing inside me. Like my heartbeat had learned to sing it. I didn't go back. I got in my car and drove Peter Lenz, lived 2 states over. I didn't care. I kept my foot on the gas until the city gave way to trees and hills and old barns melting into the horizon. His house was tucked away at the edge of a forest, a squat crumbling home swallowed by vines and moss dot. He opened the door before I knocked. "You're already carrying it," he said grimly, staring at me like a doctor delivering bad news. I stepped inside and the temperature dropped. The entire place was covered in stacks of books, yellowed news clippings, and shelves of locked glass cases filled with strange antique objects. Dolls without eyes. Clocks with their faces melted. A jar of what looked like ash dot, and in the middle of it all, taped to the wall like an exhibit, was a photo of the music box. My music box. "You've seen this before," I whispered. Peter nodded. "I have heard it." He brewed tea, though I didn't drink it. My hands were too unsteady. He didn't need to ask why I came. He already knew. "It doesn't start with the melody," Peter said, settling into a creaking chair. "The song is just how it announces itself, like a calling card. A warning, but it's not just music, it's memory." I didn't follow. "It feeds on memory," he said. "Trauma, regret, fear, especially fear. It needs to anchor itself. That's why it shows you nightmares. That's why the song feels familiar, because it was part of you. It digs through what you've buried." I remembered the dream, the shadow, the way it whispered in my voice. "You saying it's alive?" "I'm saying it's older than music," he replied. "Older than language, it just wears the box like a costume." I told him about the photo on my phone, and the message. "The shadows," he nodded, eyes sad. "That's how it begins. But eventually you won't need the box at all. You'll hear it in the wind, in your bones, in your blood. The song is just the doorway. Once it knows you remember it, it doesn't have to knock anymore." He pulled out a journal, pages stuffed with chaotic handwriting and clipped photos. It was filled with accounts from others, dozens, maybe hundreds who'd encountered the same melody. Different boxes, different shapes, different initials carved into them, but always the same song. Some described seeing a child. Others saw shadows. One woman described her reflection humming the song without moving her lips. None of them lasted long. "People vanish," Peter said, "or go mad, or disappear into themselves. Some become part of it." I swallowed hard. "Part of what?" Peter hesitated. Then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a small reel of tape ancient, brittle, stained with time. "I recorded it once," he said. "Just once. I thought I could study it. Prove it, but I was wrong." He fed the tape into an old recorder. Clicked it on. For a moment, there was only static. Then the melody started. My blood went cold. It was the same tune. The exact same one. But this time, underneath the melody were whispers. Layered, endless whispers. Dozens of voices speaking all at once. Too fast, too layered to understand. But I recognized my name. Repeated. Over and over, then clear as day. Another voice, low, ancient, curling through the static. "Do you remember now?" I stood up, heart pounding. "I have to leave," I said. I can't." Peter reached out and grabbed my arm. "You can't outrun it." "Then what do I do?" He looked at me, eyes hollow. "You confront it. You remember everything. The truth it hides. The reason it chose you." I blinked. "But why me?" He stared at the floor. "Because you've seen it before." I didn't want to believe him, but as I drove home, memories started resurfacing, pieces of dreams, fragments of childhood moments. My grandmother's attic. A small wooden box with floral carvings. Her voice whispering in the dark. "Some songs are not meant to be heard." Had I opened the music box before? Was this my second time? Was that why the melody felt so familiar? When I returned to my apartment, the box was waiting for me, sitting neatly on the table. Lid closed, as if it had never moved, but something was different. There were footprints in the dust on my floor. Small. Barefoot. Leading from the table to my bedroom. The footprints led to my bedroom. Bare. Delicate prints, too small to be mine, pressed perfectly into the thin coat of dust across the floor. They stopped just short of my bed. Then, nothing. No return trail. No signs of someone leaving. I stood at the doorway, unable to cross the threshold. My body locked up, every instinct telling me not to step forward. And yet, in the silence, the melody played not aloud, but inside me. Thrum by thrum, note by note. It crawled up my spine. I took a step. The air inside the room was colder, heavier, like I was walking into a sealed vault. Shadows clung to the corners like spiderwebs. I flipped the light switch, nothing. Just the hum of something ancient breathing in the walls. I reached the foot of the bed. That's when I saw her, a little girl, sitting cross-legged at the center of the mattress. Her back was to me. She was humming the melody. Her voice was low, almost mechanical, like a music box winding itself down. The sound made my skin crawl. I didn't know what to say. My voice caught in my throat. Then she stopped. The silence stretched for a heartbeat. Then another dot, and then, without turning, she spoke. You broke it. My legs buckled. I collapsed to my knees. I didn't mean to. I stammered. I was scared. She still didn't move. Her body was too still. Too perfect, like a porcelain doll that might shatter if breathed on. You were supposed to keep it safe, she whispered. I tried to speak, but something inside me had cracked wide open because I remembered her. Not her name, not her story, but a flash of a rainy night. A dim attic. A music box placed into small. Shaking hands, not my hands. I was 6 years old, hiding in my grandmother's attic during a thunderstorm, surrounded by boxes and the scent of dust and mildew. She was downstairs arguing with my mother. I'd gone up there to escape the noise. That's when I found it, tucked away in a crate beneath old linens. The music box thought I had opened it. And the melody played for the very first time, but I wasn't. Alone. A voice had spoken to me from the dark. Remember me. I ran that night, cried for hours. My mother blamed the storm. My grandmother never mentioned it, and over time, I forgot. But the girl hadn't. She turned to face me. Her face was pale, hollow-eyed. Her skin looked like it had never seen sunlight. She was the same girl from my dreams, from the nightmares. From the photo, you promised, she said, her voice shaking now. You said you'd remember. I didn't know, I whispered. I forgot. I was a kid. You let it in, she said, almost mournfully. You opened the door. I was locked inside. And you left me there? It hit me like a THUND air CLP dot. She was part of me, a memory. A version of myself fragmented, trapped in the shadow of the music box's influence. The song had created her, or maybe preserved her. Why now? I asked, choking on the question. Why is this happening now? She stood up, because I was ready, because the melody had burrowed deep enough, because there was no going back. The shadows in the room began to churn, swirling like ink in water. The melody rose again, but now it was warped, fractured, like it was being played backward through a cracked speaker. The girl's form flickered, and suddenly the room twisted. I wasn't in my bedroom anymore. I was back in my grandmother's attic. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. The rotting floorboards, the broken rocking chair, the cobwebbed trunk. But the colors were washed out, as if reality had been drained of warmth. The girl was gone, and the music box sat in the center of the room, open and playing its dancers, spinning slowly. I took a step forward, and someone stepped out from the shadows behind it. Tall, thin, wrong. His face was a smudge and ink blot that bled into the air around it. The shape of a man, maybe, but unfinished, like a memory half erased. You came back, it said in a dozen voices at once. Each word hit me like thunder. A chorus of whispers, pleas, and screams woven together. What are you? I asked, my voice shaking. I am what remains, it said. Of her. Of you. Of every forgotten promise. It reached toward the music box, and the melody screamed. I couldn't run. The room twisted again. The attic was gone. I was falling through memories, flashes of birthdays, funerals, moments I'd buried and rewritten. Dot my grandmother's cold hands closing mine around the music box. Dot my mother yelling in the background. She shouldn't be touching that thing. A dream of a figure standing in the hallway, humming. A whisper in the night. Do you remember me now? I woke up back in my bedroom, or something that looked like it. The walls were pulsing, breathing. The music box sat at the foot of my bed cracked. But still playing, and the girl was standing in the corner, silent, watching. She didn't speak, the girl just stood there silent. Eyes locked on me as the broken music box whirred out its cracked, limping melody. The notes were slow now, dragging like footsteps in mud. Each one more strained than the last, but I felt it dot the pressure building in the room, in the air, in my chest, like time itself was coiling tighter, getting ready to snap. I remember. Now, I said hoarsely. I remember the attic. The promise. You. The girl didn't blink. Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment I thought she might smile. Instead, she said, then finish it. The shadows began to rise from the corners of the room, ribbons of black smoke that danced like flames, wrapping around the ceiling, the walls, the box. They were memories, I realized. All the forgotten ones. The dreams I'd written off. The screams I never listened to. The melody hadn't come from the music box, Dot. It had come from me. From something that had always been waiting. Dormant inside. You said I let it in, I said. But what is it? The girl's expression changed. She looked afraid. You don't let it in, she whispered. You become it. The room split open, Dot, not literally. But in the way a thought can tear reality, one moment, I was in my apartment. The next, I was everywhere I'd ever been all at once. The attic, my childhood bedroom, a hospital hallway, my grandmother's living room, the dream where the walls bled music, and in every space the same music box played, and in every room, I was there, dozens of me, younger, older, terrified, laughing, screaming, all versions I had been, or could have been, or might become. We were all humming the same tune, one by one. The others looked at me and said, in unison, it's your turn to carry the song. I came to, gasping, sprawled on the floor of my room, sweat-drenched, shivering. The box was gone, Dot, so was the girl, and the melody had stopped. But the silence wasn't relief, it was waiting. I sat up slowly. My fingers trembled as I touched my ears, half expecting blood. Nothing, just my heartbeat, pounding like a drum in the void. That's when I noticed the carvings dot my hands. Both palms had faint. Floral patterns etched into them, deep enough to stain, faint enough to deny. But I knew what they meant. The song had been passed on, Dot. It was inside me now. I moved out the next day. Burned what was left of the box, at least the physical remains I could find. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Fire doesn't erase memory, Dot, and memory is where the song lives. For a while, it was quiet. I got a new job, moved to a new city. Life seemed to go back to normal, Dot, but the melody never really left. I'd catch myself humming it at odd hours. Sometimes. In the shower, sometimes while brushing my teeth. Always without realizing. Always the same tune. Worse, I'd hear it in others. A man on the subway. A woman at the grocery store. A child skipping down the street, Dot humming my song, Dot, and then one night, I woke up to a sound I knew too well, .click, .w. I-R-R dot the soft, metallic trill of a music box opening. But there was no box in my new apartment, Dot, only darkness, Dot, and then, from beside my bed, a voice, familiar, cold, smiling. You're not alone anymore. Epilogue, they say, trauma echoes. That sounds can linger longer than memories. That a melody heard in a dream can stay with you your whole life. They're right. The music box found me when I was a child, and it will find someone else now, because it never really leaves, Dot. It just waits for someone new to remember. Someone like you, Dot. So if you ever hear a song in your dreams, one you swear you've never heard before, but it still feels like it belongs to you, don't hum it, don't listen. And Whatever you do, dot, 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 don single quotes, open the box. I'd lived with Jake for 8 months before I realized something was wrong. He was the ideal roommate. Paid rent on time. Never left dishes in the sink. Barely spoke unless necessary. I worked late nights and Jake worked remotely, so we rarely crossed paths. We texted about bills, shared a Google Calendar for cleaning duties, and that was pretty much the extent of our relationship, honestly. It was perfect until the night I came home to find his bedroom door open. It caught me off guard. Immediately, Jake always kept his door locked, always. I'd never seen inside, never asked, never had a reason to. But tonight there it was, slightly ajar, the soft glow from the hallway spilling into the dark room like a secret let loose. I paused in the hallway, calling out softly, "Jake?" No answer. I knocked on the frame. "Hey, you in there?" Still, nothing. A strange chill passed through me. I pushed the door open a little farther, just enough to peek inside, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The room was empty, not messy. Not half-packed. Empty. There was no bed, no dresser, no posters on the walls, no clothes, not even dust. Just clean, bare hardwood floors and white walls. The only thing in the room was a single overhead light bulb swinging slightly on its chain. Like someone had just walked out and left it swaying behind them. I stepped back, heart pounding, mind spinning. Had Jake moved out? No, that couldn't be. He texted me that morning. A stupid joke about whether oat milk counted as real milk. He'd said he'd be back by 8. I fished out my phone, thumb trembling as I opened our message thread. It was all still there. Casual, friendly, painfully normal. Jake. 2:12 p.m. Can you grab trash bags on your way back? I used the last one. Jake. 3:04 p.m. Also, oat milk. Seriously. That's not even milk, man. Jake. 4:17 p.m. Back by 8? You around later? I stared at that last message. Back by 8. It was 8:12. Where the hell are you? I muttered under my breath. Against every instinct I had, I stepped inside the room. The air was cool, still. There was no scent of detergent, no trace of cologne or old books or anything that might suggest someone had ever lived here. That's when I noticed the marks on the floor. Faint, almost invisible, but there. Rectangular impressions in the wood, like a heavy piece of furniture had once sat there for a long time. A bed. Maybe. But nothing remained. My breath caught. I backed out quickly and shut the door behind me, as if that would somehow restore normalcy. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, listening to the quiet. The apartment felt different now, foreign. Like someone had swapped out reality for a replica that didn't quite fit. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and tried to calm down. Maybe Jake had packed everything while I was at work. Maybe he was moving and hadn't told me yet. Maybe I'd missed something. The thought didn't comfort me. I texted him. "Hey man, just got home. Everything good?" The reply came almost instantly. Jake. 8:14 p.m. All good. Be home soon. Want me to pick up anything? A cold shiver ran through me. Pick up anything? He'd just vanished. No stuff. No presents. Just a hollow room where a person used to be. And now he was texting like nothing was wrong. I tried to call. 1 ring, 2, then silence. The call disconnected without going to voicemail. I stared at my phone, pulse pounding in my ears. Something was deeply wrong. I went to my own bedroom and locked the door behind me. For the first time since I'd moved in. I felt unsafe. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting to hear Jake's footsteps in the hall, the sound of his door creaking open. But the apartment stayed eerily silent, too silent. Not even the hum of the refrigerator or the distant groan of old plumbing. Just a heavy, pressing stillness that felt unnatural. Like the building was holding its breath. At 3:12 a.m., I heard it. A soft knock. Not at my door. At Jake's. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Then silence. I sat up, heart hammering in my chest. Had Jake come home? Was this some kind of sick joke? I crept out of bed, barefoot and cautious, and opened my bedroom door a crack. Hallway stretched out in front of me, dimly lit by the weak glow of a nightlight near the kitchen. Jake's door was closed, but I left it open. Every muscle in my body tensed. I stepped into the hall, eyes locked on the door like it might suddenly burst open. I approached slowly, each footstep careful, silent. Jake? I whispered. No answer. I reached out and touched the doorknob. It was ice cold. Too cold for an interior door, swallowing the lump in my throat. I turned the handle and slowly pushed it open. The room was still empty. No furniture. No belongings. Just 4 bare walls, a swinging bulb, and silence. But now there were scratches on the far wall, thin gouges, as if made by fingernails or something sharper. Dozens of them, trailing downward like someone had tried to claw there. Way out. I stumbled back and slammed the door shut, my chest tight with panic. I backed down the hall into the living room and collapsed onto the couch. My phone buzzed. I jumped and fumbled for it, praying it wasn't another message from Jake. It was, Jake, 3:18 a.m. Back now. Thanks for waiting. My blood turned to ice. Back now. I looked around. The apartment was empty. I knew it was no sound, no door opening, no footsteps, nothing. And yet the message sat there on my screen like a confirmation of something I couldn't see. My hand shook as I typed out a response. Where are you? The 3 dots appeared immediately, then vanished, then appeared again, then vanished. No reply. I stared at the screen, hoping it was over, when suddenly a soft creak echoed from the hallway, not just a floorboard shifting randomly. A step. Then another. Something was walking toward me. I slowly turned my head toward the hall. The lights flickered, and then I saw him. Jake got, or something that looked like Jake. He stepped into view from the shadows, wearing the same flannel shirt he always wore, the same jeans. But there was something off. His posture was too straight, too. Stiff. His head tilted too far when he looked at me, like he didn't understand how a neck should move. And his smile? God, it wasn't right. It stretched too wide, the corners of his mouth tugging up like someone had drawn it on. There was no warmth in it, no emotion. Just a fixed, cold grin that didn't match the blank look in his eyes. Hey, he said, voice flat. You okay? I couldn't answer. I just stared, unable to move or speak. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, stepping closer. I backed away, bumping into the coffee table. Your room, I stammered. It's empty. You're not supposed to be here. Jake's expression didn't change. I live here, he said calmly. Double quotes. No, you don't. I snapped. There's nothing in there. No bed. No clothes. No you. His smile flickered. His head tilted the other way. Maybe you're just remembering it wrong. He said softly. No, I whispered, backing toward the kitchen. I'm not. That's when the lights blew out. All of them. Total darkness swallowed the room. And in that moment, I felt the air change. It wasn't just cold, it was rotten. Like soil and mold and something far worse. And then, in the dark, I heard him whisper, You let me in. I didn't remember screaming, but my throat burned like I had. The lights didn't come back. I was blind in the dark, surrounded by a cold so deep it felt like it was crawling into my bones. Somewhere in that silence, something moved, soft, deliberate, close. Too close. I ran. I don't even remember which direction I went, just that. I moved fast, slamming into furniture, my shin cracking painfully against the edge of the coffee table. My fingers fumbled along the wall until I down the hallway and the dim rectangle of light from the apartment door. I bolted for it. When I twisted the handle, it turned, but the door didn't open. I yanked again. Nothing. It was stuck. Or locked. Oh, or something else. My hands trembled as I jiggled the knob, slapped the frame. Anything, but it didn't budge. And then, behind me came footsteps. Slow. Measured. Crossing the living room, I turned around. Darkness. Jake? I called out, breathless, voice hoarse. No answer. But he was there. I could feel him like static in the air, like a pressure inside my skull. The temperature dropped again, and in the silence he whispered, You invited me. You always do. That voice didn't come from the living room. It came from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling. Inside my own head, I backed away from the door, stumbling blindly into the hallway. I reached for the bathroom light switch and flipped it. The bulb blinked on, dim. Flickering yellow light illuminated my pale reflection in the mirror. My face was soaked in sweat, my eyes wide and bloodshot. I barely recognized myself. Behind me, the hallway was empty. I slammed the bathroom door shut and locked it. Then I sat on the floor, panting, my back against the tub, and tried to make sense of what was happening. None of this was possible. None of it made sense. Jake had been real. We'd shared the apartment for months, right? But the more I tried to remember, the fuzzier the details got. Had I ever seen him eat? Had he ever left the apartment with me? Had I ever touched him? My stomach churned. I opened my phone again and scrolled through our messages, desperate for something concrete. But now something felt wrong. The tone of the texts, the phrasing, they were too perfect, like a bot mimicking how people talk. I scrolled back months. All the conversations were short, flat, emotionless, just logistical things. Rent, groceries, cleaning. Never anything personal. I searched my photo gallery. Not a single image of Jake. I opened my call log. No calls from him. I opened my contacts. There was no Jake, but I had text messages from him. Right? I scrolled back to the top of our chat dot. The contact name said Jake. But there was no phone number, no icon, just blank. A void dot, my hands trembled. Something moved on the other side of the bathroom door. A whisper. Why are you afraid? You knew what this was? I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop myself from sobbing dot. Then the doorknob started to turn dot. Slowly dot click dash click dot. I backed away, pressing into the far corner, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Stop, and the handle stopped. A long pause. Then a knock 3. Times dot soft dot rhythmic dot familiar dot, like the knock I'd heard at his door earlier. Then a voice, low and gentle, but with no warmth. Remember the deal, roommate. You always forget until I remind you. And then I did remember dot not everything. Just a glimpse. A night. A candle. A whisper. My voice saying yes to something I didn't understand, and Jake smiling, stepping out of the shadows. The memory came like a rush of cold air flooding through a broken window shards of truth, cutting deep dot it had been raining that night. A month before I moved into this place. I was crashing on a friend's couch, my savings running dry, the job hunt going nowhere. I remember scrolling endlessly through housing ads, every room either too expensive or already taken, until I saw the listing got no images, just a few words. Looking for a quiet roommate, no questions, rent cheap, move in fast. Posted by someone named Jake. I don't know why I messaged him. The ad had the stink of a scam, but desperation eats away at logic. And something about the post made my thumb move without thinking. He replied instantly, "It's yours if you want it. Just come tonight." And I did. I remember walking up to the apartment, soaked to the bone, and knocking on the door. It opened before I touched it. The hallway light was out. I stepped inside. The air was dry and warm, but heavy like the smell of books that had never been opened. Dust never disturbed. Jake was standing in the living room, his face hidden in shadow. Not because the lights were off, but because the shadow seemed to cling to him. Like it belonged to him. "Do you agree to share this space?" he had asked. There was no paperwork, no deposit, no proof of ID. Just that one question. And I remember saying it. Yes. And then everything went black. I woke up the next morning in a bedroom I didn't remember falling asleep in, with a key on the nightstand and a message on my phone from Jake. "Welcome home." I thought I'd just been too tired. That may be. I had signed something and forgotten. Now I knew better. This wasn't a lease. It was a contract. Back in the present, the bathroom was silent again. The doorknob hadn't moved since the last knock, but the air felt heavier than before, like it was straining under pressure that couldn't be seen. I stood slowly, bracing myself against the wall. If Jake wasn't real, at least not human, then what was he? A ghost? A demon? A parasite? I reached for the mirror, gripping its edges, staring into my reflection. I looked sick pale, sunken eyes, dark circles. But something else stood out. A faint mark on my neck. I leaned closer. It was small, nearly invisible, unless you knew what. To look for a sigil. A circle with jagged edges carved just beneath the skin. I touched it, and it burned. I hadn't noticed it before. But maybe I wasn't supposed to notice it. Another whisper came. Clearer this time, like breath against the back of my neck. You opened the door. You agreed. Suddenly, I realized this wasn't just about me. I remembered things. Other things. Vague mentions online. Forum posts. People describing eerily similar roommates. The same name. The same text phrasing. Jake wasn't a person. He was a pattern. A presence passed from one desperate tenant to another. He didn't exist in one place at a time. He existed wherever someone let him in. The bathroom light flickered again, and died with a pop. Total darkness. And from behind the door, I heard him say, soft and patient, "It's your turn to leave." The doorknob began to turn again, this time faster. The doorknob twisted violently, rattling like someone or something was determined to get in. I'd backed away from the bathroom door, eyes scanning for anything I could use. My phone was still in the living room, and the only thing nearby was a rusted towel rack I yanked off the wall. The air grew impossibly cold. My breath came out in short, cloudy bursts. And then I heard it again. You agreed. The voice was everywhere inside the walls, the floor, behind my eyes. No, I whispered, pressing my back against the tiled wall. I didn't know what I was agreeing to. The voice laughed. It wasn't Jake's anymore, it was older. Deeper, layered like dozens of voices speaking at once. It doesn't matter. You said yes. You let me in. That's all it takes. The door creaked open. No one stood there, but the shadows came slithering in long. Liquid tendrils that moved like smoke and ink. They snaked across the tiles toward me, writhing like they were tasting the air, searching. I hurled the towel rack into the mass. It clanged uselessly on the floor. The shadows recoiled slightly, then surged forward. I ran. I sprinted down the hallway, toward the front door, but when I reached it, the knob was gone. Not jammed. Not locked. Gone. Just a blank slab of wood where the handle used to be. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Slow, measured, approaching. Jake, I called out, my voice breaking. What are you? No answer. Only the soft squeal of floorboards under. Impossible wait. I turned and saw him standing at the end of the hall, his face no longer trying to look human. The skin was too smooth, like wax stretched too tight. The smile still wide, too wide remained frozen, even as the rest of his face began to ripple like water disturbed by wind. I'm your reflection, he said. The void behind you. Yes, the thing you invited to survive. He began to walk toward me. Not fast. He didn't need to be fast, because the apartment had changed. There were no windows anymore. The lights were gone. Only Jake and I remained. I stumbled backward into the kitchen, grabbing a knife from the drawer. I didn't know if it would help, but I needed something. He entered the room, eyes gleaming like polished coal. You don't belong here? I snapped. Neither do you, he said. The room distorted around him, walls curving in, ceiling lowering. The light above the stove exploded in a shower of sparks. I want out, I said, backing into a corner. I revoked the agreement. His expression didn't change. There's no revoking. There's no out. You don't cancel a reflection. You replace it. My blood ran cold. Replace it? He stepped aside and I saw it. The bathroom mirror. The one from earlier. It was leaning against the kitchen wall now. Somehow my own reflection. Stared back at me. Except it wasn't mine. Not anymore. Its mouth moved, but I didn't speak. Time to switch, a whispered. Jake lunged. I screamed, raising the knife, but it passed through his chest like air, no resistance, no wound. He reached out and grabbed my face, his hand colder than anything I've ever felt. My vision blurred, white-hot pain shooting through my skull. The mirror flared with light. I saw myself, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream as I was pulled forward. Toward the glass dot, my body stiffened, and then black, when I opened my eyes. The world felt wrong. I was still in the apartment. At least it looked like it. The same hallway, the same dim lights. But everything had a strange film over it, like a filter of dust and static. Colors were muted, the air thick and buzzing, and I couldn't move. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection, but it wasn't mirroring me. It was watching me, smiling, stretching its mouth wider and wider until the grin split unnaturally across its cheek. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My throat didn't work. My mouth didn't move. My reflection waved. Jake. He had taken my place. I was behind the glass now. Time passed. I don't know how much. Maybe hours. Maybe weeks. I watched my body move without me. It went about a life that looked normal from the outside, cooking, showering, checking the mail. But the way it did everything was too smooth, too efficient. Like it had studied humans and was doing an impression. Sometimes it would stand in front of the mirror and just watch me, stare at me, grinning, like I was some zoo exhibit. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I was trapped. Frozen in that cursed piece of glass, a permanent echo of myself. And then someone knocked on the door. Jake-me opened it. A girl stood in the hallway, suitcase in hand, wearing a nervous smile. She introduced herself. Said she'd seen the roommate ad online, and the place seemed perfect. Cheap rent, good location. Too good to be true. Jake smiled back with my face. Welcome, he said. You're going to love it here. She stepped inside. The door shut behind her. And the lights flickered. That night, I watched from the mirror. As she settled in. She seemed nice, naive, just like me. Her room was the one next to mine, Jake's old room. But now it was filled again. My body had made it a home. Clothes in the drawers, posters on the wall. It had built a whole new life. Inside my skin, I wanted to warn her. Wanted to scream, to pound on the mirror, to let her know the thing she was living with wasn't me. It wasn't human. But all I could do was watch and wait. One morning, she passed the mirror on her way to the kitchen. For just a second, just one heartbeat, our eyes met. Not me and her. Me and my reflection. And in that instant, I saw it. Glass shimmered. Her steps slowed. Her brow furrowed. She glanced back, confused. I tried again. I focused every ounce of thought, every scream I couldn't release. Get out. Don't trust him. Her head tilted. My reflection. The imposter smiled. Everything okay? She blinked, then smiled back. Yeah, just got a weird feeling. Must be nothing. She kept walking. And I knew it was starting again. Jake, whatever. He was patient. He could wait weeks, months, years. He'd make her feel safe. Then he'd make the offer. The agreement. He'd let her think she was in control. And when the moment came, he'd ask to be let in. Just like he asked me. And if she said yes, she'd take my place. And I'd be free. But for now, I wait in this cold, silent glass box, watching life go on without me, watching my body smile, laugh, eat, sleep, and every night, just before the lights go out, he stands in front of the mirror and whispers, almost time.